morning. On behalf of J. del Rio, thank you for joining us today. My name is Montserrat Muñoz. I am part of the client success team at J. del Rio. Today, I will be your moderator for this session titled VAT Refund Management, Best Practices and Key Learnings. Today, we are honored to have Salvador Perez, Tax Director, and Roberto Baeza, Tax Manager, both from J. del Rio. Salvador Pérez Barrios is Tax Director at J. del Rio's Guadalajara office. He has over 10 years of experience advising multinational companies on tax optimization, regulatory compliance, and the digital transformation of the tax function. Throughout his career, Salvador has led high-impact projects in industries such as agribusiness, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, consumer products, and tourism. His experience includes restructuring business acquisitions, value chain transformation, and tax compliance process. He has also implemented technology solutions based on data analytics, successfully automating key processes such as tax refund, invoice reconciliation, and responses to tax authority requirements. Roberto Baeza is tax specialist with a solid trajectory in managing tax obligation. He holds a bachelor degree in public accounting from the Escuela Bancaria y Comercial, complemented by a diploma in tax advisory and control from the Instituto Tecnológico Autónomo de México, ITAM. He currently serves as tax management at J. del Rio, Mexico City offices, where he leads tax compliance and strategy, including the management of VAT and CIT refund, handling tax audits, and concluding internal team training. His prior experience includes extensive expertise where he developed skills in vendor accounting management, bank reconciliations, and processing of digital tax receipts. Now I'll give the microphone to our speakers. Welcome, Salvador and Roberto.
Thank you, Monse, for your introduction. Hi, this is Salvador. I'm honored to have the opportunity to talk to you and all the clients and friends from J. del Rio. Here with me is Roberto.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure being with you. It will be such productive agenda in order to review these VAT balances in favor and our key points about this process with the authority.
Thank you, Roberto. The agenda for today we'll be starting with the activities that accrue VAT balances in favor. Later, we continue with the management of the VAT refund process. Second, with the court rulings relevant to VAT refunds. Later, with the suggested documentation and review for a VAT refund. And finalizing with additional information requirements and questions and answers.
Yeah, first of all, we would like to discuss about what are the reasons for VAT balance in favor are generated. Well, the main thing is that some companies have activities subject to a 0% VAT, such as exportation of services or goods. In the case of exportation of goods, they must be a definitive exportation according to the custom law. And for the exportation of services, you must look to the Article 29 in order to review that you are rendering services listed in that article in order to consider that as exportation of services. And also have in mind that the services must be paid by a foreign entity in this when you are exporting services, right? Other activities that could generate balance in favor balances because you are subject to a 0% VAT are the allocation of medicines or the consumption of food for human purposes.
Yes. Also, the number 3 is for the companies that have operations on the border of Mexico, on the northern border or southern border, because there is a presidential decree that allows to these companies to sell items, sell goods, or render services at an 8% VAT rate. So in considering this, the company will be collecting VAT at a 8% rate and be purchasing goods, paying to suppliers at a 60% rate. So this differential between the rates could be generating VAT balances in favor. It's important for applying this decree to fulfill all the requirements and have all be sure that the operations are executed inside the border, the 30-kilometer border in the north or in the south. The number 4 is also applicable for the IMEX companies, remembering that IMEX companies are the maquila manufacturing and exportation companies that are importing goods on a temporary regime. This temporal importation provides the option to these companies to defer the custom duties, but if these companies have the VAT certification, can defer also the payment of the VAT in the importation of goods. So the companies that are making this type of importations will be generating VAT balances in favor when this importation regime is changed to a definitive importation. So in this case, the company will be generating VAT balances in favor.
Yes. Well, other important thing to have in mind is when you have significant investments in this regard, well, you will be paying more to your suppliers than the collection that you have in 1 month. And for that, it is likely that you have balances in favor. Most of the time in preparative periods, there is very common that the companies have this VAT balances in favor because you are not collecting in such months, and well, you have the opportunity to ask in refund. Just to have in mind that this, when you are in a preparative period, you must fulfill additional information in order to prove the authority have all the elements in order to validate that you will be collecting in the future this VAT.
And related to that, Roberto, the companies that are in preparational periods also will be generating balances in favor of VAT because these companies are not creating any revenue because they are in preparative periods, and they are making expenses on fixed assets, installments, and these will be generating creditable VAT that will be occurring with VAT balances in favor. For this specific type of operation, there is some specific rules to obtain the VAT in the VAT refund, and we will talk about it later. I think this is important. All these reasons are important because the first question from the tax authority in a refund process is you have to explain to them why are you generating these balances in favor. So this is important because there will be a link between the activity of the company and the VAT provisions of the law that apply to said activity. So this is important point in the first question from the tax authorities.
Yes, I totally agree with you, Salvador. In that point, the recommendation here is first of any filing, please identify what activities you are carrying out and what is the reason of the balance in favor, because for sure that it will be the first question of the Mexican tax authorities when they review it. Yeah, and follow up with this point. Well, there are some companies that carry out activities exempt of VAT or non-subject to VAT. According to the VAT law, if only you perform activities exempt or non-subject to VAT, you cannot credit the VAT. Instead, you have the ability to deduct them. However, if you have activities exempt of VAT and or non-subject to VAT, and activities subject to VAT rated 0% VAT or 16% VAT, you have to compute a credit factor in order to determine your balances in favor. For that, it's very important to review all the activities that you perform in order to compute correctly your VAT return, and after that, well, file the refund.
Yeah, and this is important because for these two type of activities, we will not be collecting any VAT from the clients. We won't be collecting VAT, but we will be expending and paying 16% VAT to our all suppliers. And if we have a confusion and take that VAT as creditable, we will be requesting to the SAT improper refund, and the tax authorities have mentioned that if we are requesting improper refunds, we will be target for audit. So this is an important thing to consider to avoid making improper refund requests. A little list of example for taxpayer for exempt activities are the sale of land, the sale of houses, the fees, medical fees for the doctors, and the non-subject activities are the activities normally that are executed outside the Mexican territory.
That's right.
So a sale of goods that are located outside Mexico are considered as a non-subject to the VAT law. Following with that, the number 3 is when the taxpayer makes civil settlements as a form of discharging obligations, because which may have VAT implications. Normally, the companies and the companies that are part of the group of multinational companies are making settlements or offsetting of accounts between related parties. This is so common, and we have a recent court ruling about this that states that this offsetting is not a valid method of payment for the VAT to be creditable. Remember that the VAT, one requirement for the VAT to be creditable is to have been paid. So this ruling is discharging this option of payment, and we must pay the VAT with cash flow. This is always this will be the suggestion to have cash flow on the VAT operations. And number 4, also this is important because the VAT is creditable when the expense are deductible for IT purposes. So if the expenses are not deductible because they not comply requirements for the IT, such as the invoice or some limits or threshold to the deductions, the VAT related to those expenses are not creditable also. Or is the same for non-deductible expenditures, that also if they have some VAT involved, they will not be creditable, and this will be a improper refund of VAT if they request it. Okay, we will be following with the tax management of the transaction management of the VAT refund. It's important to start to think and analyze what do I need to have before requesting this VAT balance in favor. And as we were talking before, the first main object is you have to be clear about the reason for the origin of the balance in favor and have written support of the legal provision that states that this VAT balance in favor is correct. Also, it's important to fit the activity of the company with the legal provisions stated for the VAT law. For example, we have the VAT law mentions that the first sale of produce or animal produce, such as leather, fruits, vegetables, will be a 0% rate activity. So we must know and link the activity of the company with these provisions in order to be accepted for the authority and obtain a favorable VAT resolution. Also, we will need to have the documentation ready and a description of the material structure used for the main activity of the company. This structure must be the information about the fixed assets, the information about the employees that we are using to execute the activity of the company and obtain revenue. So this is an important point, because also we will need to link this obtaining of revenue for this activity with the expenses needed to make for executing this activity. It's important make this link and explain it to the BA to the SAT. Number 4 is important to have the documentation related to the tax domicile and its branches. The company must state against the tax authorities the tax domicile when will we have be issued requirements, information, requesting information. So for the VAT refund process, no one VAT petition will be accepted and have a favorable resolution if the tax domicile status of the company is not located. So for this type of requirement, we have to make an appointment and request the verification of the tax domicile from the tax authorities. In this case, the tax authorities will send an employee from the team, from the audit team, and will be taking interview with the company, with the legal representative, taking photograph of the location of the company in order to update this status. So it's important also to have this documentation related to the tax domicile. Number 5, it's important to have a list of products and services that the company sells. This is a common question from the tax authorities. Normally, they ask to make a link between the tax invoices and the line items that are stated on these tax invoices, and provide this list regarding the tax invoices and make a link between the tax invoice ID and the list that we are supplying to the tax authorities. And 6, it's important to have the supporting documentation for the input and output VAT, including the integration of the transactions generating the VAT creditable and the VAT collected. This is important because normally the authorities ask an Excel file with all the transactions, say payments to suppliers, that are generating a VAT creditable. And the authority normally asks that this Excel file includes the tax invoice ID of those expenses, and also have to be cross-checked with the bank statements and state the payment of those invoices. So normally this is the most important point, the link between the tax invoice, the bank statements, and the VAT creditable manifested on the VAT return. So considering this, is always suggested to have a preliminary diagnosis, because if we don't have this diagnosis at the moment that we are attending information requirements, we will have problems that we are going to be talking later.
Yeah,
Robert, I don't know if you want to.
No, I fully agree that you have to have in your records this defense file in order to be prepared, because as we will see in the next slide, the process when you are in an audit, or well, well, in the requirements, to be more clear, is very limited, and we will explain this little by little. Well, you must submit this um, this request for the VAT return through the Mexican Tax Authority's webpage. And we suggest that preparing a letter in order to explain what activities you are carrying out and what is the reason that you generate these balances in favor is very recommendable in order to the auditor have elements to first review. However, the authority has the power to issue one requirement within the following 20 business days after you file the refund through the Mexican authorities webpage. And you are allowed to give a response within the following 20 working days. As you can see, this could be a short period of time if you don't have the defense file, for example, photographies, and sometimes are asked agreements signed by the legal representatives and all the working papers that supports your balance in favor. And sometimes in this period of time it's hard to work in all of the information that are requested because sometimes 20 or more items are asked in this first requirement, and you, as I mentioned, you only have 20 working days. And to have in mind also is important that you must file this also through the Mexican authorities webpage. And sometimes the web is complicated because you must zip all the annexes and the response letter, of course, in order to be able to obtain the acknowledgement of the filing of this first requirement. After the first requirement, also the authority has 20 days, 20 working days in order to review what you response in this first requirement. And technically, the authority has other, well, a second requirement can be issued within the following 10 working days. And you are able to respond in other 10 working days. Well, as a resume, you have one requirement, which is called first requirement, and you have 20 working days to answer. And the second requirement, 10 working days. After that, there are 4 paths in order to give a response. The first one could be that your refund is fully approved. That will be the best scenario. And the second one is a withdrawal of the refund. In this case, you are able to ask again, but you for the refund, but you have to start again with the process. And the third one is that the Mexican tax authorities issue a tax audit, and that is a very common when you are asking for huge money. For example, in my experience, more than 20 million pesos, it is likely that you will be in a tax audit process, which means that you will be delivering information, and the authority has the power to issue as many requirements as they want within 90 working days, and also have the authority the power to ask your suppliers, which we call compulsa. What we meant for that is that the authority will ask your supplier in order to match the information that you provide. And if this happens, the process will be extended to 180 days in order to give you the final resolution. That is very important to have in mind because, well, your process that normally takes place for 40 working days according to Article 22 of the VAT law. If we are in the case of a tax audit, your process will be extended to 180 days, which will be more or less 1 year. Well, after that tax audit, or you will be give you a final resolution, which could be fully approved or maybe will be denied. And that is some change that we will be reviewing in the following slides. But in this year, the Supreme Court issue a resolution which states that if you are in the case of a denial, you lose the right to ask again for the refund, and you must appeal through an administrative appeal, and this administrative appeal will be a process with the same authority but the legal department, or go to a trial which must be filed through to the court. You know, Salvador, if you have any comment here.
Yes, it's important because the prior assessment and the file for the VAT, the defense file for the VAT refund is important because the legal term for the tax authorities to make the refund is the 40 working days. But if we don't have the information ready to answer all the information requirements, we will extend that time until 70 working days. The 40 legal working days that are the legal term, and the 20 business days for the first information requirement, and the 10 business days for the second information requirement. So if we want to have a better and a quick response from the tax authorities, it's important to have a prior assessment of the VAT refunds and the information. This is the best scenario that we can have.
Yeah, and adding here, also it's important to mention that the 40 working days that is stated in the VAT law is suspended when you are in the requirements. That is very important because, well, the period of 40 working days, more or less, it takes in the reality more 6 months approximately, because, well, it is very likely that you will be asking for 1 or even 2 requirements according to law.
If this prior assessment that I was mentioning is not happen, what will be the consequences? Normally, when we have the information request, we are trying to answer all the questions from the tax authorities, and we identify errors in the computation of the VAT. This is so common. We also identify that we don't have the supporting information for all the expenses, and this is an important point because the tax authorities, Mexican tax authorities, are requesting more information than the tax invoice that we receive from the supplier. The authorities call this type of information as the materialidad or materiality, and this information is the additional information that we can provide to the tax authorities that the goods the supplier sell to us or the services that are rendered to us by the supplier are effectively happening. Let me say, on freight services, we have the interpretation of goods. The supplier must be issuing a tax invoice, but it's important that this tax invoice also includes information for the in this tax invoice is mentioned as traslado, the information of the movement of the goods. We will also need the PO regarding the cotization of the services provided by the suppliers. Let me say, this is important all the information additional for the tax invoice, because the tax authorities are not accepting the expenses with only the supporting tax invoice. This is a very important point.
Yes,
Also,
I will. I will add. Sorry for that. I will add also the agreement, photographies, minutes, emails. That gives more elements to the Mexican tax authorities in order to validate that the service was effectively rendered or the goods were effectively aligned to the taxpayer.
thanks, Robert. Yes, this is important. The agreements, the photographies of the goods, of the location of the company. So this is important to have at hand for answering the information requirements. Also, if this prior asset is not happening, we can identify transactions that were not considered in the original VAT return. So we will have to file a amended tax return and adjust the original numbers, and in most of the cases, restart the 40 working days process. So this is important to avoid, because time is money. We need the money as soon as possible. Also, if we answer the requirements from the tax authorities with not all the information or with missing items, what will happen is we could have the withdrawal of the procedure, as Roberto mentioned before, and the time elapsed since the filing of the VAT refund request to the withdrawal of the procedure must be restarted. So this time will be lost, and we'll be starting again on this process. Also, may be stated by the tax authorities that the VAT balance in favor is inadmissible. So the VAT balance is not correctly justified with VAT provisions. And in this case, with the denial, as Roberto mentioned, the next steps are only the administrative appeal or the trial before the court. And for these types of processes, normally an attorney is involved. So expect you will be having attorney fees that will be an additional expense in order to obtain these VAT refunds.
Yeah, also it's important mentioning here that the administrative appeal lasts at least 1 year, and well, trial, it is so complicated to determine how much time it is, but take in mind, like normally takes 3 years these trials. That's the reason why we are mentioning that a strong defense file and computation duly compute will be very important prior the filing, because these administrative procedures, if when you are in a denial case, will be very well, it will take a lot of time.
Thank you, Robert. Also, with this prior assessment, we will be detecting some errors on the monthly VAT return, such as misspelling or misclassifying activities or acts in different fields, such as an activity subject to 16% rate will be stated as a 8% rate, or confusing 0% rate VAT activities with exempt activities, and this can create confusion for the tax authorities. Also, we will miss VAT withholdings paid and credited. That is important because the VAT withholdings cannot be credited against the collected VAT, at least when these withholdings are paid to the tax authorities. So there is a difference of time when the VAT is paid to the supplier and when the withholding is paid of that VAT to the tax authorities. So it's important to have this record and this tracking for the VAT withholdings to be in order to be creditable. Also, it's important to separate the creditable VAT from expenses, so from the acquisition of fixed assets. It's important to have this in mind because the VAT reform form includes this separation. And if we don't have this assessment, we will miss special mechanisms included in the VAT law, such as the virtual VAT related to the import of services, because this import of services includes is a taxable event for the VAT. So we have a VAT that we will be paying to the supplier, but this supplier is abroad, is not located in Mexico, so we will be withholding the VAT for them, and we have to pay the VAT to the tax authorities. So this is named as virtual VAT because it's considered as a VAT collected for a taxable event realized by the company, but the VAT paid and withhold, it's also creditable against the VAT collected. So it's a effect zero, but it's important to have in mind that this is included in the form of the VAT return.
Yeah, what are recommendations that we should suggest is sometimes the auditors says that they want information out of the records, and this is very common, and we could say that it is advisable to provide them because they give more elements in order to approve your refund. And in order to the tax authorities ask information out of the records, what we meant is that it is not stated in a first requirement or a second requirement. Even in a tax audit, they ask this information out of the records. But it is advisable because they give more elements and they are fully reviewing your request, and this gives elements in order to finalize your audit or your procedure in a quickly way. For that, in order to give this, we also suggest that ask for a meeting with the Mexican tax authorities in order to meet the auditor will be very helpful in this process, because if you know who is your auditor and you have a meeting face to face, gives that connection with them, and also gives that you are effectively rendering services, and you are not providing information that it is not accurate or incorrectly, or maybe the services are not rendered by your suppliers. Among other reasons, they give this capacity to verify that you are effectively or your VAT is correctly computed and you have all the elements to ask them in refund. And well, also here it is important to say that this information out of the records, it is asked to the tax advisor, or sometimes they look for the legal representative in order to provide that information. Well, also sometimes when they doesn't have the information complete, they ask for a withdraw to the legal representative. And this is very common because they say that they don't have all the information. Maybe they don't have the photographies, or don't have the agreements of some information that they want to review in order to approve the authority. They say that, well, I don't have enough elements, and they go to the legal representative and ask for this withdraw. Sometimes it's advisable, sometimes it is not, because, well, if you do not withdraw, they could issue a denial, and if it is a denial, well, as we mentioned, you must go to other procedures that are, well, that they consume more time and fees in order to the companies, right? Then we suggest if you do not have all the information, or if you know that you won't be able to obtain that, we can suggest that a withdrawal is a good option in order to first have all the defense file and then go to the process to the day one. And finally, also it is very common that the procedure stated in the federal tax code, which we mentioned that there are 40 working days, it is not following by the authorities. Sometimes the authorities last more time in order to provide a final resolution or a withdrawal, because the reality here is that the authorities are receiving a lot of refunds day to day, and they doesn't have all the capacity sometimes in order to respond within these 40 working days. For that, and again, well, what we suggest is to have this meeting with the authorities in order to follow up on how is your process, if they need anything else from the company, or if it is okay, and they are reviewing with the supervisor, among other reasons that could happen. But it is very common nowadays that the authorities takes more time that the timeline is stated in the law.
Yes, and I would like to add in this slide that it's also advisable to look for a meeting with the local administrator of the SAT office located for the company, because with this meeting we can make a plan of the VAT refunds in order to have open a channel of communication, and we could make an agreement of how many VAT refunds we could be filing for each month. And this is important because if we file so much VAT for the refund request at the same time, the authority will respond with opening a tax audit, because the Roberto, as Roberto mentioned, the authority doesn't have the employee and personnel to review all the VAT refunds received. So it's important to have a plan with the tax authorities in order to avoid opening a tax audit for the VAT refunds. And regarding the contact with the legal representative to ask for a withdrawal of the VAT balance, in my experience, is also applied when the company have operations or transactions with a supplier that from the SIT point of view, this supplier doesn't comply with all the requirements or all of his obligations, and the tax authorities mentioned that you must withdraw the VAT related to that supplier, and sometimes it is advisable to make that adjustment at that withdrawal, because you can be obtaining, let me say, the 95% of the VAT refund, and the 5% that was withdrawn related to that supplier can be asked for the refund later, when you have all the documentation and the information needed to approve and to support that the operations with that supplier are real and exist with the supporting documentation. So this is an important point also.
Yeah, totally.
We will be continuing with the good rulings regarding the VAT refunds and the refunds in general. The first one is this case law issued by the Supreme Court regarding the VAT refund and the VAT creditable, that is stating that the civil offsetting of accounts, the compensación, as we say in Spanish, is not considered as a form of payment and cannot give rise to a VAT balance in favor or a VAT creditable. The tax authorities are sorry. The Supreme Court is stating that that this form of payment that is considered in the Civil Code of Mexico is not applicable for VAT, and the VAT in one of its requirements to be creditable on the Article 5 says that the VAT must be paid in order to be creditable. So considering that the Supreme Court is considering that and saying that this is not a valid form of payment, the only form of payment valid for the VAT will be the cash flow, because the interpretation that the Supreme Court gave for the civil code and the VAT provisions will be also applicable for another form of payment that doesn't involve cash flow, such as confusion, and this will be a problem for the VAT refunds and VAT creditable. So our suggestion is to make and perform the cash flow in all the cases and avoid this form of payment. So, and this case law is applicable and mandatory since May 15, 2023.
Yeah, well, also other resolution that the Supreme Court issued recently was that the activities non-subject of VAT, as mentioned, the principal one was the activities rendered outside of Mexican territory. If you have expenses which can generate VAT creditable, well, cannot be part, well, cannot be creditable and in order generate balances in favor. That means that if you only perform activities non-subject, you are not able to credit any VAT for those expenses. However, as we mentioned, if you carry out activities non-subject to VAT and subject to VAT of 0% VAT or 16% VAT, you must compute the credit factor. That is very important because sometimes you file a return because you are performing activities non-subject, and well, when the resolution is issued, well, the authorities will respond that, well, you are not allowed to do it, and a denial could be issued because you are not complying with the VAT law. And for that, we also suggest review the activities non-subject and separate them from the activities that there are 0% VAT, as an exportation of services, for example. And also, if it is highly recommended that if you have a mix of activities, subject or non-subject, trying to identify what expenses are linked with activities non-subject in order to be sure that these expenses will be not well, the companies will not have the ability to credit, and what expenses are linked with activities subject because you are allowed to credit and trigger balances in favor. That will be our recommendation because, well, this mechanism is highly reviewed by the company, by the Mexican tax authorities, sorry, and well, they are disallowing this crediting and, well, denying balances in favor according with this resolution of the Supreme Court.
With the tax refund, regarding this case law issued by the Supreme Court, this is regarding the information requirements requested by the tax authority. This case law states that in order for the tax authority issue a second request for information, the taxpayer must have complied with the first request. And this case law, this criteria from the Supreme Court has two interpretations, one in favor of the taxpayers and one in favor of the tax authorities. The first one, in favor of the tax authorities, the tax authorities can, if the company doesn't supply to the tax authorities, doesn't deliver all the information and documentation requested on the first information requirement issued by the tax authorities, the tax authorities are not obliged to, they don't have the obligation to issue the second information requirement and go directly to the resolution that can be the denial, the withdrawal, and this is an important point to consider. So we will have to be answering all the information asked by the tax authorities in order to be able to have a second requirement of information and give more explanations to the tax authorities.
Yeah, for sure. In that point is very, well, it's very complicated because sometimes even with this cash law, the authorities, in order to gain time, issue this second requirement. That is very common. That even if this second requirement doesn't have anything to, well, doesn't have any related with the first requirement, they issue this second requirement in order to gain time, because as we previously mentioned, they don't have the enough personnel sometimes in order to review all the refunds, and the mechanism that they commonly use is issue second requirements, even though that all the information stated in this second requirement was already answered in the first one. But well, here also the recommendation is answer again with the information provided, and if you have more elements in this second requirement, also provide them in order to give a strong defense file to the reviewers.
Thank you, Roberto. And also the other interpretation that is in favor of the company of the taxpayer is that, imagine if in the first information requirement the authorities ask a list of items A, B, C, and the company answers all the questions from the tax authorities, and in the second information requirement the tax authorities can only ask questions about this and detail from these same items, cannot open new items or doubts that were not included on the first information requirement. So this is favorable, and this is in favor for the taxpayer, and we hope this help to have a better understanding with the tax authorities and in the process of VAT refunds.
Well, this is one of the newest Supreme Court resolutions, which basically states that if you do not appeal the resolution when you are in a denial position, you cannot submit again the request. Why is that? Because the Mexican tax authorities provide you the element that why are not fulfilling all the requirements stated in the law, or why you are not able to obtain that VAT balance in favor. And for that, you have to proceed with this administrative appeal or trial within the 30 working days after the resolution. If you don't do it, you lose the right of this VAT balance in favor. And also, it is stated that formal grounds, means that if you do not provide, for example, the agreement signed, photographies, and supporting documentation about the rendering of the services, they can also deny your request, and you must go through these procedures in order to defend that you are that your balance in favor is proceed. Well, as we mentioned, the time here is very crucial because you only have 30 working days in order to file these procedures, even administrative appeal or trial, in order to avoid losing these balances in favor. Well, here is one important thing, that the administrative appeal, you can provide more elements to the authorities, and in the trial you cannot. And for that, we suggest first go through the administrative appeal, which in our experience takes more or less than 1 year, but sometimes, as we mentioned, it takes more than uh, the time stated in law. And after the resolution, if it is also denied, well, go to a trial, which takes more time, more or less 3 or more years, because the procedure by trial are more complicated. The resolution is issued by the court, and well, they also don't have sometimes all the personnel in order to attend all these requests. But we suggest go first to this administrative appeal in case you have more elements to prove to the authority. If not, well, we can explore go directly to the trial.
Okay, this is also a thing that is being discussed in the court, in the Supreme Court, but it has not been resolved yet. This is a contradiction of criteria that will be related to operations performed by the IMEX companies. The contradiction states that the IMEX companies, the Maquila companies, were performing virtual returns or virtual exportations in order supporting with the general foreign trade rules, in order to support that the goods that were previously imported are outside or were exported as part of this transaction. But in the review from the tax authorities, they are mentioning that that nevertheless this virtual return facility were used is not applicable for VAT purposes. For VAT purposes and withholding VAT purposes. Let me say an example of this contradiction. We have the Maquila A that is located in Mexico, and this Maquila have a principal that is located abroad, the principal of the Maquila. And remember, for a Maquila transaction, the principal is the owner of the inventory of the raw materials and all the goods produced by the Maquila. So it's normal that the Maquilas, we have a series of Maquilas that the goods that were transformed by the first Maquila, let me say the Maquila A, transferred the goods for the Maquila B to be also transformed again in something else, and later transferred to a Maquila C in order to obtain, from a set of processes, a final product. So in this case, we have the principle of the Maquila, the Maquila company A temporarily import the inventory, the raw materials, makes the transformation of these materials, and makes the delivery of the goods to the second Maquila, to the Maquila B. And this delivery of the goods is supported through the file of a customs declaration of virtual exportations, the Pedimento B5, B5. And for custom purposes, the Maquila company A is considered that the raw materials that were previously temporarily imported is considered that these materials were exported and are outside Mexico, and doesn't have the obligations to pay the VAT for these imported goods. But because the principal of the maquila is the owner of the inventory and the final products produced by the maquila A, the principal of the maquila sells the goods that are located in Mexico to the maquila B for the second transformation. So in the VAT law, it states that the purchasing goods from a foreign party, and if these goods are located in Mexico, this is a taxable transaction and must be included at 60% rate of VAT. And the Mexican maquila company, the company B, has the obligation to withhold the VAT generated for this transaction. So this is the key point of the contradiction of criteria. One court from the north, and remember that in the north part of the country are the most maquila companies, stated that this is a valid transaction make with the customs declarations of virtual exporting, and the transaction, the goods were not located in Mexico under this facility, and the obligation to withhold the VAT is not applicable. But in other case issued and another court ruling issued by a southern court, a court of the south, where they are not maquilas, many maquilas companies in that area, issued the court ruling in a contrary way, stating that these goods were located in Mexico. Nevertheless, the maquila, the virtual exporting facility were used, and this is a transaction that will be subject to VAT withholding and paying to the tax authorities that withholding. So this is a essential point for the maquila. This is pending to be resolved by the Supreme Court. There were in the agenda for discussion in October, but was skipped and deferred the reviewing of this issue, and we don't have any news at this moment. So what will be the outcome of this contradiction of criteria? If the Supreme Court resolves that the facility of virtual exportation is valid to consider that the goods are not physically located in Mexico, the maquila companies will have the certain that the operation that were executed previously were correctly taxed, and will not have any problem in the future. But if the Supreme Court states that the facility was not applicable for VAT withholding purposes, the maquila companies will have the risk to pay a retroactive collection of the fees, of the VAT, of the source charges, and interest payments regarding all those with VAT withholding that were not withheld in time and paid to the tax authorities. So this is a key point for the maquila, and we will be in touch and look for the resolution of this item, and we will share with all the clients and friends from JA Del Rio to you when we have this resolution.
Well, back in again with the VAT refunds, we suggest that in order to prove the authority that your VAT is correctly determined, we will reviewing what documents we suggest having when we are talking about VAT collected. For sure, we suggest that a reconciliation with all the deposits stated in all your bank accounts and opening in the name of the company are fully matched and classified. What we meant for that is, well, identify what are incomes taxable to a VAT, 16%, which ones are 0% VAT. For example, if you have activities exempt, non-subject, among others. If you have refunds, well, prepare a working paper with all these deposits and classify them. The deposits that there are subject to VAT, we suggest that includes the invoice related with these transactions and with the detail of these invoices, such as tax ID of your client, and the base of the activity, the date of the invoice, etc. And well, if you are performing activities as an specialized services, well, you have to prove that you have all the supporting documentation in order to provide these services. Well, also, for sure, you will be asked for the agreements with your principal customers and provide elements that you render the services or the goods that you will sell to them. For that, well, we have mentioned that photographs are important. Sometimes the Mexican tax authority asks these photographs be notarized, and well, sometimes if they are asked for a notarized photograph, could generate huge fees from the fees for in order to notarize those documents. And well, we suggest do it because, well, give more elements to the auditors, but well, you must compute how much the fees will cost in order to evaluate if it is likely to obtain that or not. And well, as number 5, as we mentioned, the reconciliation of VAT collected is important, and match it with the ledgers of your accounting records, because that is also a thing that the authorities are reviewing nowadays, since one of the principles is that there be duly registered in your accounting records, and for that we suggest reviewing prior the filing. Also for the exports, well, you will have a date when the goods are outside of Mexico according with the data stage. However, it is not the same day when you collect those exportation, and for that we suggest having a working paper that states when the goods were exported and when you collected, and that will be the moment that you must compute the exportation for VAT purposes, because sometimes these dates do not match. And well, for unrecognized charges or other incomes that you may have in your accounting records, we highly recommend that have a defense file for those income, for those deposits that there are not subject to VAT, because they will ask for this information through the requirements or through the audit, and you must prove that where you are not considered this deposit as a subject to VAT. That is very important because in our experience, the thing that must review the auditors are the deposits, because that generates output VAT and will decrease your balance in favor or even deny it. And for that, all those deposits that are not subject to VAT, well, prepare the corresponding defense file or proof why are not subject to VAT. Maybe there are transfers into accounts, for example, and other kind refunds for your customers, and match them with this supporting documentation in order to give the elements to the auditors. They do not consider as a subject to VAT.
Yes, and the information that Roberto mentioned is for the relation with the clients, the revenue, the VAT collected. And in the case for the VAT creditable, and the number 7 is, it's important to have a working paper of the bank statement withdrawals when we will be classifying these withdrawals with payment to suppliers, transfers between accounts, returns, unrecognized charges, and other expenditures in order to provide to the tax authorities that all the transactions and the payments were made and the VAT is creditable. Number 8, it's important to have the payment to suppliers, all the information of the tax invoices, the tax invoice ID, the date, line item, the same as the VAT collected. It's important to have the working paper related the transactions subject to a 0% VAT rate. It's also suggested. Also, it's important to have agreements or contracts with the main suppliers. And if it's possible, provide them with fecha cierta, the certain date, in order to give more comfort to the tax authorities that this agreement exists when the operations were made and were not executed the last date or the previous date before the review. It's important to have not only the agreements, also all the supporting documentations that prove that the service or the goods were actually sold or service rendered. It's important to have that. It's important to have this accounting reconciliation of the creditable VAT with the accounting books and make the integration. It's important for the import operations have all the pedimentos, the VAT, the customs returns, custom declarations, because this is the proof of all the VAT paid when the goods are imported. It's also important to have a confirmation with all the suppliers that there are not listed as suppliers that issue fake invoices or are not considered as a non-located taxpayers. This is important but because normally the tax authorities doesn't want to accept any creditable VAT for the non-located taxpayers, and for the suppliers that issue fake invoices, this is a legal provision that the operation with these suppliers is not considered creditable for VAT and deductible for IT purposes. And finally, it's important to have an explanation of the business reason of the expenses in order to prove the strict indispensability of these expenses and be deductible for IT and the creditable for the VAT purposes.
Yeah, and adding to the supporting documentation for or reviewing prior the filing of the VAT refund, I will add that the data stage is very important in the case of having import VAT, because that is the base that the Mexican tax authority already has in order to review that, and you can confirm that the import that you have in your pedimentos is the same as is stated in this data stage. Okay, other suggestions before the requested of VAT balance in favor will be if you have activities with your related parties, have in place a transfer pricing study, well, photographs, as we have mentioned, of the products, workspace, the render of the service, maybe if the service was provided by an outside advisor, well, mails, minutes, among other activities, POs also will be acceptable and requested by the tax authorities. It is very important if you receive activities with specialized services that complies with the requirements stated in the law. Also match your trial balance with your bank accounts, and all the records must match and duly computed in your accounting records and match with the returns. Also, it's very important, and this is highly recommended, that prior the filing have all the documentation in Spanish. For example, the agreements, when you are in a requirement of 20 working days, it is likely that you don't have enough time to prepare this this translation into Spanish, and sometimes in agreements it is likely that the authorities ask for be translated by an official translator and notarize them. And well, if you are in a requirement in 20 working days, well, it will be complicated. For that, if you have agreements in other, well, in English, well, translated prior the filing. And well, also, as we have mentioned, the authorities will carry out verification of your tax domicile. We recommend that, well, perform that prior the filing and obtain the verification.
It's important to mention also that there are some specific types of VAT refunds and balances in favor, and they have special procedures included in the procedure 10 of the Federal Tax Code of the Annex 1A of the miscellaneous rule of the income tax, VAT tax, sorry. This type of special VAT balances in favor includes the agricultural sector, the VAT generated by fixed asset investment projects. For example, in this case, you will have to disclose to the tax authorities what are the projects that you are investing, what is your expectation of revenue, your expectation of expenses, and all the information since the beginning. It's important also you have special VAT requirements for the taxpayers who produce and distribute products for human and animal consumption for food. Also, the taxpayers who produce and distribute patent medicines, where we need to disclose and share with the tax authorities the information about the registry of these medicines against the COFEPRIS, the Mexican FDA. And also there is special requirements for the companies that are generating VAT balances in favor in the pre-operational period. So it is important to have this in mind, that in these cases are special requirements that are in the procedure 10 of the Federal Tax Code.
Well, as the final recommendations for the requirements, well, we suggest have clear in your response letter, response all the information that it is requested. Sometimes there are a lot of items in these requirements, but if there is, sometimes there are similar questions, but the suggestion is answer all of them, even if it is the same response, because sometimes applies. Clarify what you are filing to the authorities, try to be clear in your annexes, using a technical and clear language. That is very important, because the auditors sometimes only review the letter that you are providing, and if they are not, and if the letter is not understanding, they will not review the annexes, and the scrutiny will be more. And well, that will be the most important points. Also, well, it is important to respond if it is possible, 1 or 2 days prior the deadline, because sometimes the web page is complicated in order to file all the documentation, because well, there will be a lot of filings and annexes, and you have to save them. And well, that's the reason that we strongly suggest do it with a couple of days prior the deadline in order to avoid anything happen with the web page, because sometimes it goes down or other things happen and you will not be able to answer from other platform than the Mexican Tax Authority's web page.
So what are the situations to consider when we have the resolution from the SAT regarding this VAT refund request? If we have a positive resolution, it's okay. That is the best scenario. We will be receiving the money in the following days. So this is the best option in the best scenario. But if we have a partial refund, this is important to review, because normally the federal tax code states that the part that of the VAT balance in favor is not approved, this part is considered as a denial. So this denial must be, as Roberto talked before, must be requested through an administrative appeal or the trial in the court. So this is important, because the party's denial cannot be requested with all the procedure again. So for the withdrawal, we will have the resolution with stating that the SAT withdraw the procedure of the VAT refund request. And the suggestion is to review what are the reasons that the SAT mentioned for this withdrawal, and prepare the documentation needed, all the explanations that answer that reasons, and you can have another filing, another VAT balance in favor request. And if we can be mentioning in the history of the procedure that these were the objection of the tax authorities, and explain in the letter that we'll send with to the tax authority with the VAT refund request, we can identify and explain all the information needed in order to clarify these objections. And when we have the denial of a partial of the total amount of the VAT refund request, we must review the reason for that denial, and analyze if we have to make and provide more documentations. And this more documentation can be provided, as Roberto mentioned, in the administrative appeal. So we have 30 business days from the day of the resolution is notified to file the administrative appeal of the start the trial against the court. So this is important, because if we miss this deadline, the resolution must be considered as definitive, and we don't have the opportunity to ask again for this balance in favor in specific.
Yeah, and for that, I will finalize saying that if you miss this 30 business day, you cannot credit this balance in favor. You lose it.
Thank you, Roberto. It's also important to consider that we cannot consider as expense for IT purposes.
That's right.
So now we will start with the question and answers. Unfortunately, due to the lack of time, we will not be able to answer all your questions. However, we will make sure to contact you as soon as possible with the answers. The first question would be, what has been your experience regarding the scope of tax information request? How many points are typically requested, and what type of information is the most commonly required?
Yeah, I will go ahead with, if it is the first time that you are filing a VAT refund, for sure there will be at least 20 points, because the Mexican tax authorities do not recognize you and they want to proof that you are rendering the services or you are not trying to simulate operations, and will be a huge requirements. If you are a recognized taxpayer for them or for the administration, I think with between 10 and 15 points, but it depends of the administration.
All right, thank you very much for your answer. The second question would be, what actions have you taken when the tax authority fails to respond within the deadline established by the federal tax code?
Yeah, the option that you have is to obviously look up for a meeting with the audit team of the tax authority to review what are the questions or what are the information pending for them to be okay with the VAT balance in favor. This will be one way, and another way that is also suggested, but use it in a responsible way, is going to present a complaint against the PRODECON, the tax ombudsman, where in this complaint we can state that the tax authorities are exceeding the term for the 40 business days to make this refund, and they will ask and will be helpful to moderate between the SAT and the company in order to close this open item. This will be my suggestion. I know, Robert, if you have anything else.
No, fully agree. Sometimes the PRODECON helps in this process, and it will be, well, we must analyze case by case, but I think it's a good way to go.
All right, thank you very much. The third question would be, what has been your experience with the application of civil compensation in supplier invoices?
Yeah, here, well, in my experience, they are denying these expenses because, well, and more with this resolution by the court, they give the authority more elements to deny if you are offsetting these, well, expenses and try to credit them.
All right, and finally, have you been contacted directly by the SAT requesting information informally, for example, by phone or by email?
Yes, this happen normally with the tax authorities. They ask for more information, some clarification about the information already provided, or new integration about some expenses. But this is helpful for the process. It's better to have a good relationship with the tax authorities, and in the most of the cases, when the tax authorities are able to have this channel of communications, the VAT resolutions are in a positive way. It's better always to have this open channel of communication with the tax authorities.
All right, so we have now reached the end of our webinar. On behalf of J. del Rio, we sincerely thank you for your participation. We remain at your disposal for any questions, inquiries, or advice you may need. Please feel free to contact us at the emails displayed on the screen. See you soon, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much for
Thank
the
you.
opportunity.
Pleasure.